we have organized the International Campus Waldorf. We launched it the first time in the COVID time, 2021, and continued in 2022. And now we have the third sequence of lectures. And we are very much happy that we have found so many wonderful speakers from all over the world. It mirrors a bit the topic of this new sequence of lectures of the International Campus Waldorf. It's about chances and challenges of a global education. And the idea about this topic that popped up in my mind when I was this year at a ERA conference in Chicago, where I also met Kenya Strong for the first time. And this ERA conference, American Educational Research Association, that was in Chicago, and it was about diversity and social justice and topics like that. And I became aware that although we face global problems all over the world and global problems in education especially, all the curricula and all the policies around schools and education are national curricula and national policies. And there is an exception because in the Waldorf world, we have the chance and the possibility to really address a global education, which is not restricted to politics and which is not restricted to national curriculums and standards and stuff like that. So this gives us a wonderful opportunity and platform to address that topic of a global education. And so we start this sequence today. And I would like to say that we have a recording which is ongoing. So for those who don't want to be seen in the video, you can mute you can take the video away from your computer. And this will be put online, the conference, after 1 or 2 weeks, and will be available for people who can't join right now. Mostly, of course, due to the time shift. So we have registrations again from all over the world, and especially people from Asia. It's in the middle of the night, and many people maybe will take the opportunity and upload the video in 1 or 2 weeks. It will be available. And also, I would like to say that Laura will put in the chat after 1 hour a certificate of participation. You can upload that too. And then you can present it maybe to your institution. You can use it for your purpose as you want. Students from Alanus University, they can receive credits for this certificate of participation. And Laura, please support me. Is there something else I should add on the technical level?
No, I think that should be it. And everything else that will happen today, people will get an explanation. For instance, we're going to do some breakout rooms and so on. But this will come later. And I think everything else you already said. Thank you.
Okay. So a warm welcome, especially to Kenya Strong, who is in San Francisco, as I believe, right now. And it's morning time, 10 o'clock, something like that, 10:30. And she has been a long time. She has a Master of Education, and she has been a Waldorf teacher in San Francisco too for a long time. And now she's, you have to do what's your actual work. Please say something about yourself. And she's speaking about social justice as the core principle in education, curriculum content, and relationship building. And I'm very much happy to have you here in our circle and looking forward to your talk, Kenya. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here and grateful to all of you for showing up at whatever time of the evening it is for you on this grateful day. And so, yes, I will be speaking on social justice as a core principle in education, curriculum content, and relationship building. I am over the moon excited about this type of work. So if my speaking and my speech gets a little too fast, please don't hesitate to invite me to slow down and repeat myself as we're going through the exercises. So I'd like to give some framing to the time that we have together here. It's a good idea to have something to write with and on for one of the activities. Later during the day, you will be asked to go into a breakout room with a few others. If you choose to, there will only be one breakout room opportunity, and then I will do a lot of talking from there, supported by a few slides. We'll close with some questions and answers as we move through the activities. So my official introduction, thank you so much, Joost, for everything that you've presented so far. Yes, I am Kenya Strong. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I identify as a hetero cisgender Black American woman of the African diaspora, and I occupy the unceded Ramaytush Ohlone territories of San Francisco, California, although I was born and raised in the Muncie Lenape territory of upstate New York. I have been teaching on and off now for more than 30 years, with the last 12 in Steiner or Waldorf independent or public schools. And I want to emphasize that I am speaking from a North American perspective, specifically the United States, because there are very distinct differences between ourselves, Canada, and Mexico. And our time together does not allow us to go more deeply into those differences, but I do want to acknowledge that they are significant and noteworthy. To help get us grounded and set the intention for this lecture today, I'd like to share a quote with you. Love is higher than opinion. If people love one another, the most varied opinions can be reconciled. Thus, one of the most important tasks for humankind today and in the future is that we should learn to love, live together, and understand one another. If this human fellowship is not achieved, all talk of development is empty. Rudolf Steiner. Currently, I work with the American Waldorf Association of North America, the BIPOC, or the Black, Indigenous, and People of Color Advisory Board, to help decolonize and course correct inequitable practices in the Waldorf movement. And I am the newly assigned head of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in a progressive school that is not a Waldorf school. Unfortunately, the trend for people of color, specifically Black educators, to leave Waldorf education in the United States is a common occurrence and admittedly problematic. My mission at this time, however, is to bring cultural consciousness, racial fluency, and social justice as a core principle in institutions and in relationships, as I have been personally and directly impacted by social injustice as an educator and as a student that was particularly harmful, I found, in Waldorf environments. So I have a personal investment in being able to make a difference, make a change, and elevate other educators who might be experiencing the same experiences that I've had in the past. These times and current events necessitate bringing social justice to the platform. For me, it asks the question, how do we teach the full truth of world history and American history in such a way that does not shame or embarrass either white students any more than it might shame or embarrass Black and brown students? How do we hold that balance? The history is one, and the perspectives, however, are many, but the pain is still pain. It simply comes in from different directions that we can acknowledge without denigrating any of the people in our collective history. The challenge is in becoming and being the educator that all students can see, hear, imitate, and love. It's important to me to understand first what I mean by social when I speak of social justice or injustice, and what identities are most greatly affected in the United States. Social identities are different from personal identities in that they can be defined as those you share in common with a group of other people, like your in-group. They're often socially constructed labels that are placed upon you, such as race or gender, whereas personal identities are those that you choose for yourself, such as a career as an educator, or based on a hobby, such as a rock collector. This next slide is a short list of social identities, that's slide 4, that impact access to full participation in American society. So I recognize that some of these identities may not be as salient to people in different cultures, and that other more salient identities might be missing. So please feel free to consider anything that I might have missed. They would include identities such as race, gender, class, socioeconomic class, religion, citizenship, sexual orientation, ability, gender, or language. Are we able to share a slide there? Thank you. Just to give grounding and a certain balance for those who might need the visual support. So take a moment and consider what you want other people to know about you in this space upon meeting you for the first time through your social identity. And I will share my identity and my introduction with you again, just to give it some framework. It's very different when you walk into a room of new people. Hi, my name's Kenya. But when you say my pronouns, I identify as, it takes it to a different level. And for me, that's important to walk into this space specifically about social justice and injustice and understanding where my social identities are most impacted. So if you'll recall, I started with the I am statement as a sense of ownership to what I am claiming for myself as opposed to what has been projected upon me. I am Kenya Strong, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I identify as a hetero cisgender Black American woman of the African diaspora, and I occupy the unceded Ramaytush Ohlone territories of San Francisco, California, although I was born and raised in the Muncie Lenape territory of upstate New York. Next slide, please. This tells you the social identities that I want you to know about me right now. For the purposes of this encounter, I've shared my name, my pronouns, my sex, my gender, my sexual orientation, race, citizenship, the indigenous land that I occupy now, and the land upon which I was raised. And all of these are relevant to me on American soil when I think and speak of social justice here in education, around education, and in building relationships across social, cultural, and personal differences. Each one influences my access to resources and how I am perceived and received by others in the world. And again, that also impacts how I'm able or willing to engage with the world. I invite you now to take a few minutes, 2 or 3, possibly 4, to formulate or write an introduction of yourself that you feel comfortable sharing with maybe 3 or 4 other people in a breakout room when we get there. And consider what you want a stranger in this space to know about you. Make it short and concise, maybe about 30 to 60 seconds long if you want to share. And if you've never considered this introduction or creating an introduction for yourself before, 3 minutes may not seem like nearly enough time, but keep in mind, it's not a biography. It is just the introduction. And if you have considered your personal introduction, given your social identities as the forefront, take this time to fine-tune your message or practice your delivery. So again, if we can go back to the social identities, slide number 6, as a reference to what you can lean towards or add or eliminate. You are not obligated to keep any one or all of those in your list. And you might also want to include a personal detail of yourself, such as a favorite food, athletic team or sport, a party trick, or anything that brings you joy. So I will be quiet now for about 3 minutes. I hope that you've had an opportunity to get something started for yourself, at least just to begin a conversation. When you do go into your breakout room, slide 7, please, share only to the degree that honors your boundaries. Sharing your pronouns or sexual orientation is not a requirement. And keep in mind that our time here is precious, so please make sure that everyone has an opportunity to share. And if you have an opportunity to finish before the time is up, please feel free to share more deeply, engage with one another, and get to know each other socially. About how many people do we have in a room?
Just 7. Look, one more.
Sure.
I would just, well, so
maybe 4, no more than 4.
Yeah, so right now we are 77 people. So if we would have 4, it would make 19 per session.
Okay, great. So I'll share about, let's do about 7 minutes total in our breakout room. And please let us know if you have any trouble getting into your room, and we'll help you out. And if it's totally fine if you want to keep your camera off, but I do encourage you to share verbally, vocally, if you can. And also, if you find yourself in a room alone or with other people who may not be able to engage, come back to the main room and we'll find a way to reassign you. So we're making our way for the sake of time. And I know it's late in the evening for all of you. I will continue and let our friends make their way back into the room. I hope you were all able to make a new friend and that was enough time for you. If you'd like, please share in the chat in just a few words what that experience was for you. I hope it was positive, but please say if you found it challenging, identifying or introducing yourself through your social identity. That includes what it was like to be asked to consider your personal introduction from that perspective, or what it was like being able to exchange that introduction with strangers. I'm assuming no one knows each other here, but I could be wrong. All right, now that we've made some conscious connections, let's explore where and how these social identities determine where social justice and injustice can occur in American education, and more specifically, American Waldorf education. Slide 9, please. By definition, social justice is justice in terms of the equitable distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society. According to Emmeline Soka Huberty, in a socially just framework, the curriculum is specifically chosen to broaden students' worldviews through incorporating different ideas and challenging opinions. Instead of ignoring very real-world issues such as sexism, racism, poverty, and more, a social justice education framework addresses it and encourages students to exercise analytical thinking. Schools committed to social justice and education pay close attention to their choice of curriculum and how it can be used to expand their students' minds. And there is a link of resources that I will share with you if you would like to read more of that content. In comparison, social injustice is the unfair distribution of resources, opportunities, and rewards within a society. In education, social injustice encompasses issues including unequal access to quality education, discriminatory practices, and disparities in outcomes based on race, gender, socioeconomic status, and other dimensions of identity, causing long-term injury and harm. Social injustice is when factors like wealth, gender, and race determine what kind of an education an individual can receive. Students not privileged enough to receive an education on par with more privileged students are given poor foundations for the rest of their lives. Their ability to earn certain income can suffer, which in turn affects access to healthcare, housing, and just general safety. When the education system isn't committed to providing equal opportunities and privileges, it negatively impacts a society both culturally and economically. Slide 11, please. Zachary Wright Rochester explains that social justice in education done right does not force kids to believe in something specific, but rather to think for themselves and nurture their analytical skills. The goals include more empathy, more justice, and more equality. Students taught this framework will ideally have a stronger sense of what is just and fair, and choose careers and lifestyles that support their entire communities. Thank you. You can stop sharing. Anthroposophy is uniquely designed to support justice and help us move through these trying times. It's provided us with all of the tools we need, basically a roadmap for ways of being, thinking, and doing, and meditations so that we are prepared to take up this task of addressing the social crisis of our times in a meaningful way. Today, this crisis happens to be primarily, in the United States at least, about race. Anti-Black racism, anti-brown racism, anti-Asian racism, and a few other contentious energies that have bubbled to the surface in recent years, months, or even weeks. We are in the middle of a different kind of challenge in which discussions about racial bias and fallacies have largely been uncritically examined, or perhaps even covered over with a veneer of virtual signaling. It's a pattern that I have seen perpetuated in Waldorf education for many years now. There are many elements of Waldorf education that should be preserved and held precious. And we have to be honest with ourselves about which parts need to be rinsed out and made equitable. The perpetual question for me is, what parts can I rinse out in order to keep the beautiful parts from being tarnished and to keep them as relevant, meaningful, and powerful as they were intended to be? Most, if not all, Waldorf Steiner schools in the United States are entirely Eurocentric and buy into the heteronormative white male dominant culture and curriculum, ultimately leaving itself to be in the perfect position to cause injury and harm to the global majority. The global majority that is anyone not European heteronormative white male. The US operates in a racialized capitalistic culture, and the systems of oppression against the global majority have been gaining traction in the US since before 1619. These systems now run on automatic, whether there is a racist or a capitalist in the room or not. And that is intentional and by design. We need to make Herculean efforts of global proportions to funnel social, just, and equitable practices into our institutions and into our lives when the systems have had at least a 400-year head start on us. The curriculum must teach children the skills and language to recognize and navigate through social injustice and inequity when they experience it themselves or witness it happening to someone else inside or outside of school settings and across cultures and social differences. Slide 12, please. In 1996, article from the Anthroposophic Press, it is printed that Steiner said to the parents on the 13th of January, 1921, more than 100 years ago already. In the time since we began our work, we have carefully reviewed from month to month how our principals are working with children. In these years to come, some things will be carried out in line with different and more complete points of view than in previous years. And I have the link and the reference to that lecture included on that slide. But I would like to note that not only have we not reviewed and rewritten our curriculum from month to month in the US, we haven't carried it out in line with the different and more complete points of view in any capacity. It is still very Eurocentric. If any one of you were to come and visit most of our schools here on American soil, you would still think that you were in Stuttgart because of the content and the lens with which the curriculum is being presented. Infusing education with social justice as a core principle requires updating that curriculum and finding new ways to build relationships with each other and the children coming to us. One perspective I would like to share with you and have begun doing research around is building an Afrocentric K-12 Waldorf curriculum, literally beginning in the cradle of civilization itself. Africa contains the largest quantity of the largest number of natural resources in the world. It is rich with flora and fauna and lends itself easily to the idea and the principles of truth, goodness, and beauty in the world. Beginning in ancient Africa is where I would start our lectures, even and lessons, even for our kindergartners. There are fairy tales and folklore for the very young children, and the very history of the migration of man follows the stream of consciousness all the way through the grades. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't go anywhere near Europe and European history until about 5th grade, when the children are old enough to process the gravity of war, death, dying, famine, disease, public beheadings, crusades, and deadly winters. I would take them on journeys through the Serengeti. I would explore Persian and Indian spices, textiles, Chinese teas and silks. I would tell stories of Mansa Musa and Harun al-Rashid before I ever introduced Charlemagne. Many questions come to me when I do racial facilitation and cultural consciousness workshops around what we've been used to doing, what we're supposed to do now. How do they know if they're even doing it right or if they're doing it at all? And are they the ones who should be doing it in the first place and presenting new content and new curriculum ideas? Slide 13, please. The pain points for different groups seem to be more dynamic than our ability to keep pace. So my answer to all of those questions is I don't know. I don't know if you're the one who's supposed to do it. I don't know if you're doing it right. I don't know if it's gonna work. I don't know if this is even it, but keep trying anyway. Helping people recognize and reconcile with either being direct descendants of colonial settlers in a colonized culture or from benefiting from the suffering of others in those cultures as a default line of ancestry that one didn't necessarily ask for, but are still a part of, is an ongoing task. Very often when people begin doing the inner work, a meaningful self-evaluation, things get messy. Your body may rebel against you. You may literally get sick, get a headache, get an ear infection, spike a fever, lose your appetite, increase crankiness, or even increased peacefulness. It's very similar to the response we might expect from a child at the center of a child's study. Once we know that we can become physically uncomfortable, we can prepare to expect it, and the less upsetting the work will be when that does happen. It's vital that we create safer, courageous, and empowering spaces for our children. They must be equipped with the language, as well as the strategies and awareness to recognize and navigate through social injustice and inequity when they experience it or witness it. They must be armed with the capacity and the courage to speak truth to power. They are the ones who will make the most significant changes, and we have to pave the way for them. Children are facing challenges now that could never have been considered in the past. Climate change, global pandemics, wars, increased wealth gaps, increased anxiety, depression, neuroses, and artificial intelligence. Authentic concern for and sensitivity to academic, social, emotional, and physical needs of every child is paramount. And I believe that Waldorf, Steiner education and institutions can be the leaders in that evolution. In closing, I'd like to read a few excerpts from a poem that parents in the state of Florida tried to get banned. They were successful in having this and 14 other books banned or restricted because they said it was not educational and had indirect hate messages, that it was confusing and indoctrinating. Some of you may recognize it, and I'll give you the title and the author after I read the most significant parts to it. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. And the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. So we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew. Even as we hurt, we hoped. Even as we tired, we tried. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burden. But one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. When the day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it. Does anyone recognize what that poem was? I can't see any of your hands. I'm going to keep scrolling. Deja Williams. Yes, I know you know. I know you know. Go ahead.
I think, I'm not entirely sure. Is that Amanda Gorman?
It is Amanda Gorman, the inauguration speech.
Yeah.
I believe it was for Obama in 2021. And that is on slide 14. And as I mentioned, there were 15 books that were attempted to be banned. And this was one of them. When we speak of the sexism and the racism and the granted, this is not the entire poem. She ended up turning it into a book. So perhaps if you read more deeply into it, if you tried really, really hard, you might be able to find it. The saddest, most heartbreaking part of that is that they succeeded in restricting it and making it inaccessible to younger children and said it was only appropriate for upper middle school or high school. Some of the other books that were banned included books about gender fluidity. Some books had content that they considered too violent, but for the most part, the majority of the authors were women of color, including Toni Morrison, The Bluest Eyes. That's been on the record for a very, very long time. I would encourage you, and I will share the links with you, to go out and purchase every last one of those books as an act of rebellion and make that decision for yourselves to see exactly where the contention and where the divides may be existing in your spaces. I am eternally grateful again to be able to share this time with you, and I'm open to answer any questions. Oh, there's so much stuff in the chat I did not even see. Let's open that up and see if there's anything that I missed. I'm seeing a response, I think, to being able to share your identities with each other, saying that it was great. It was nice to be able to connect to this large global community. Thank you, right on. I second that. It was super nice. Too little time to say something about ourselves. Too little time to make new friends. All right, we'll see if we can make up for that. And unbelievable, I attended the British SW school. I'll say that's a Waldorf school, and was never taught about all those wonderful cultures you speak of. Oh, yeah, you feel a hole. Okay. Check the dates for the Obama inauguration and when she actually spoke the poem. I think it was the Biden, inauguration. Thank you. So I'm open for discussion, conversation. I think there was a question about the cultures that were mentioned. Was that Mansa Musa and Harun al-Rashid? Because I would love to tell a story right now. Let's see who that was coming from. Natasha?
Hi, yes, thank you. Yeah, it's just, you know, you mention all that, and I just sit there in class 5, 6, 7, 8 and think, where were all those stories when I was sitting there? You know, it was so Eurocentric. So thank you for everything you're doing and for passing this on to us all. Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure. Are you familiar with Mansa Musa or Harun al-Rashid?
No, that's my whole.
Okay.
Because I went to a British Steiner Waldorf school, and I really truly feel that those of us that had that wonderful experience do still have big holes, and that's because it's too caught here in Europe. Yeah.
And thank you for saying it is a wonderful experience, because it is, and we have the capacity to do so much with it. Although I'm not currently employed in a Waldorf school right now as a full-time position, I'm still deeply connected in being able to pull people through those holes, right, and fill them in as they go through their journey, because I do believe that Waldorf education is perfectly equipped to address the crisis, the social crisis that we find. It's simply what people have done with it through the years that has kept it so pigeonholed. So Mansa Musa is an Ethiopian king known to have greater wealth than anyone in the world to date. So he makes Jeff Bezos and all those other dudes look like small fries, right? So already it's tempting to tell this story throughout the grades, like who's got more money, right? So you've already tempted your students with this juicy story. And he would take this pilgrimage to the promised land, to the Holy Land, and he would pack up all of his belongings, all of his wives, all of his wives' belongings, all of his servants, all of his servants' wives, all of his servants' wives' belongings, all of his riches and gold and jewels and his cattle and his sheep and whatever it is that they had. And then to be able to travel through the land. And he ended up going through Egypt. And you would think someone carrying that much gold, that much wealth would feel threatened, but he didn't. Anytime you saw someone on the street and they needed something, he gave it to them. There was no need for aggression or war or to take it. It's like, here, I'll give it to you. He had so much, it never even dented his pocket. As he traveled through Egypt, he ended up giving away so much gold that it collapsed the Egyptian economy, and it took them 12 years to recover. And then he went back home, peaceful and happy. So the story can evolve itself into the terrain with which he traveled, the animals, I don't know if they're actually sheep, goats, whatever, that he had, the cattle that he traveled with. What kind of jewels did he have? How many wives did he have? Who set up the tents? Where did they stop? Who looked out for him? All of those questions that can be answered. And you can go deeper into that story to explore it. The other piece of Harun al-Rashid is in cooperation with Isaac of Judea and Charlemagne, because they were actually cohorts in their time frame. And it was Isaac of Judea that was the interpreter and the mediator between Charlemagne and Harun al-Rashid of Persia at the time. And they would exchange gifts and jewels and stories. And if you know the story of the Arabian Nights and Abu might be known as a monkey in the stories, but it was actually a real elephant. So you can say, where did this elephant come from? It took him 4 years to move that elephant from, was it India or was it Asia at the time, or excuse me, or was it Africa? Because at the time, African elephants were almost to extinction. So where could he have gotten that elephant? How did he get that elephant from wherever all the way to Europe, to Charlemagne? Unfortunately, before any doctrines could have been signed, both gentlemen passed away. So we have a representation of Christianity, Islam, and the Jewish faith, all working in beautiful harmony. And if you tell these stories to children early enough, they get it. Despite what the world is doing and its craziness now, they can have a place of compassion and have a reflection of unity. And that is a true story. And I see a hand up in the corner.
Yes, thank you so much, Kenya, for your talk. When you talked about that there is a necessity of changing the Waldorf school and inventing it, maybe something new about the curriculum, and then you said it's too much European-centered and has a white male face in a certain way. This counts for North America, and I think this also counts for Europe. And I can see this point. My question is, what is your experience with it? Because being in North America, and I think you are some kind of a counselor for Waldorf schools in this process, and how is the reaction? Is it embraced? Is it a difficulty to do it? Do you have a good ground for developing it in a new way? So my question is, how is the mood around Waldorf? Is it persistent concerning changes like that? Or is there an open door for you? This would be because in Germany, I wouldn't know if it's if the door is open, so to speak. It's just a question, you know, because the tradition is very, very strong, and there are so many people who love Waldorf how it is and don't have that kind of a view on it. Yeah, and therefore my question is, how's your personal experience and how you look into the future?
Mm-hmm. My personal experience in the past was harmful in a Eurocentric, heterosis, white male gendered culture. it was an elimination of everything that represented anything that I held valuable and true and precious. Yeah, there's so many layers to that. I am seeing openness when you tell them that they have permission to do it differently, and you give them the truth about Waldorf indications and Starner's reason for starting Waldorf schools in the first place. I think if you were to look at American education right now, he would be mortified with how little we have changed and how little we have done to address our social crisis. It's supposed to be about the here and now, where you are physically and where you now are in time. And we have not really progressed that forward. The power players are holding on to that power with a death grip. So there is resistance in some communities, but in other communities, because of the richness and the diversity of the children coming before them, they're realizing and recognizing that they have to do something more. Often I will get a phone call from a teacher that says, I'm getting the first Black student in my class. I've been teaching for 30 years. What am I supposed to do to not cause harm? Accept the fact that you are going to cause harm. It's going to happen. Like I said, systems of oppression have been gaining traction for 400 years. You pumping that one little break is not going to be enough. So as soon as you can say, okay, I'm going to make a mistake and I acknowledge that, prepare yourself for your response to it. There's a school now that has adopted this theory of making an Afrocentric curriculum and starting in the cradle of civilization, and they're moving that through the grades. And there's no interruption to that stream of consciousness. There's no interruption to the truth and the beauty. And instead of taking everything back to Europe, they take it back to Africa. We talked about plants and seasons that do not exist in Southern California. I haven't seen one snowflake in Southern California, or even in Northern California. We've got all these stories about the geese and everything else, and you know, the winter change. There's no winter here. So what is the harm then of saying, okay, we're going to take it back to Africa? Africans made it to Turtle Island 200 years before Columbus, right? And we celebrate Columbus Day, and we celebrate these things that were hurtful and harmful. The Trail of Tears, the Trail of Death, as a celebration on the land that we occupy and stole as Americans. And we have to have a real truth. We had a group of graduating seniors come back to our school once and said, you owe my parents a lot of money. I can speak 2 languages, I know seasonal fruits, I can play 3 instruments, but I do not know how to engage with anyone who's not like me. You did not tell me the truth about the genocide of the indigenous people. You did not talk about Black people before the slave trade. My personal experience is that I didn't know, with my education growing up in a public school, I thought Black people were created for the purposes of slavery. I had no idea that there was an entire beautiful nation of kings and queens that was exploited because of its wealth of richness. Had I had that knowledge growing up, I wouldn't be talking to all of you right now. That's for sure. I have a whole lot of other stuff going on. I wouldn't feel the need and the call to have that mission. It is wounding to the soul to be erased from history when you built it. I'm complete. Was there another question? Wow, that got dark heavy quickly. Everybody okay? All right. And help me out if there's another hand that I don't see. I have 4 pages. I do see one. I see 2. Siva and then Paul.
Good evening. So yeah, it is it is a lot depressing to look back at history and to not acknowledge what was done, and to really have that courage to acknowledge, accept, and ensure that it is not repeated in different forms. I think sometimes it just changes form and then it exists. The injustice, it kind of stays, but it changes form. It takes a lot of conscious thinking and awareness to go back and to even recognize that, oh, it's just hiding in plain sight. Because I come from India, and here we still have casteism, which is sometimes like it's so deep rooted, and people don't understand the difference between equality and equity. They actually have trouble understanding this, and after several hundred years of oppression, if someone is given a chance, they really are questioning, why are they getting this chance? Shouldn't this be equal? No, they didn't get a chance for like several hundred years. Can you imagine how many generations of people have lost a chance at good education, good healthcare? It is difficult. It is really difficult to even discuss these things. But it is important as educators, I think, and people who are among people who can influence the younger generation and people who are involved in anthroposophy. It is important that we are aware of this and we bring it to the forefront and discuss it. It's going to become extremely uncomfortable at times. But we have to discuss them. We have to make our younger generation go back and look at history and say, oh my God, I'm not going to repeat that. It's very important for us to ensure that everybody gets this social justice. And thank you very much. It was beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for what you bring. And then I saw Paul's hand go up earlier.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I feel very touched and humbled by witnessing your presentation and your witness, and I feel very grateful for the contribution that you're making into all of our communities worldwide. I had a particular reflection on what you said a little while ago about rinsing anthroposophy and finding the treasures within anthroposophy, and what I'm hearing maybe is making a distinction between some of the core principles of anthroposophy and some of the cultures that have built up around the movements, whether in education or agriculture, and how in okay, so a little disclosure here. For years, I didn't feel as though I didn't have the courage to speak up about these issues because I as a white male, I didn't know what to do. I was scared of getting it wrong, and it was upon realizing that by taking that position, by having that lack of courage, I wasn't challenging the unsafe spaces for my students, and it's a safeguarding issue. It's about creating safety for children and for colleagues, that everyone has to participate in this conversation somehow. And I'm wondering within what you're saying about anthroposophy, whether the principle of addressing unconscious bias is something that we can draw out from anthroposophical ethics somewhere. And I just wondered if that's something that you had encountered or looked at all.
100%. I have an activity that I do in my facilitations to help illuminate the unconscious bias that lives within. It's always awakening for everyone involved and being able to lean into the tools that have been placed before us. Anthroposophy does so much to make it possible to impact change. And you said it so well. It was, what we've done with it within the culture to almost bury it in some ways. What I was hearing, those were not your words, and that the nuggets of anthroposophy are definitely there. doing the inner work and being uncomfortable, Ruth King describes discomfort as a core competency in going through it. It's not those feel-good moments like, oh yeah, we're gonna go do Martinmas and celebrate something. Steiner himself says that you have to walk in man's suffering with him on this earthly journey.
Oh,
so to be in the suffering is just as glorious and beautiful as being in our celebrations and our festivals.
Thank you. It also reminds me what you say of the alignment of social justice with eco-justice, and that whole notion of staying with the trouble from Donna Haraway, of really wrestling with the uncomfortable areas about injustice from an environmental point of view, and the contributions of like feminist new materialism, and where that will align itself with anthroposophy. So I get excited, but thank you so much.
Right. Thank you for your vulnerability and acknowledging that sometimes we're afraid to get it wrong. Just keep trying, right? Fumble forward, you'll get it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I see anyone else? A digital hand is easier because it brings me to the front page, but I can acknowledge if it's not possible for you to do that. Oh, there we go. I see one. Thank you, Deja. My favorite name, by the way.
I appreciate you so much. Just everything that everyone has been saying, I certainly echo, and certainly am truly grateful for you sharing all that you have with us during this time. I'm in Brooklyn right now, currently on the Lenape-Hoking land of the Lenape people. And I find myself in a very unique and very exciting role as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Brooklyn Waldorf School. And so I'm grappling with this work all the time and engaging my community in these conversations. And I find that one of the largest roadblocks to getting people on the same page about the importance of this work is that holding fast to what they believe Steiner said about Waldorf education, and certainly what I'm perceiving as holding on to those traditions. And someone said it, I don't know if it was you, there were so many amazing things said about this idea of inertia. And certainly, yes, about, that's those systems of oppression. There's also these systems of how things have been done in terms of the curriculum and the practices within Waldorf schools. And do you have any advice, or can you speak to, I envision it might be easier founding our own new Waldorf school in Brooklyn that is founded on these principles of relating Waldorf pedagogy to Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood and reflect where we are locally versus bringing it into something that's already been going and happening for so long. Can you speak to trying to bring this into that kind of inertia of what's been happening, bringing that European Waldorf pedagogy to the United States, and having those kind of Eurocentric systems persist would be very, very helpful.
You said so much. Thank you for all of those questions. I hope I remember to address it all. I don't believe in throwing out everything, because you will have children of European descent in your classroom, right? So we have the bits and the pieces, and we try to give those different perspectives. However, it's not centering the European curriculum, which is what has been happening, right? We keep coming back to it, the classics, St. Jerome, and Greece. We talk about Aristotle and Socrates, but we skip the part where they both studied into Africa for 23 years before they brought it to their people. We talk about ancient Egypt, and we skip the part that we're talking about ancient Africa, because Egypt isn't Africa. We find ways of dividing and segregating in our language. So simply changing the language and how we present information can have a tremendous impact. Finding the access point to power and privilege and what that means. And your privilege doesn't mean that you were born wealthy. It's never what it means. Privilege means that you have access to full participation in the resources and political influence in your society. That's it. You have full access. If you are female, if you are brown or black skinned, if you are poor, you do not have full access. You don't have full access, and that's all that means. So being able to bring language and understanding and a common definition of what these mean in your conversations and in your discussions. I have not met anyone who is blatantly racist, but they come off as racist. They say racist things. I have said insensitive things with all of my privilege. I can sit on my soapbox all day as a Black woman. I am able-bodied. I will get up out of this chair, walk down the stairs, pick up my backpack, get in the car and drive away and not think about it. I can take a vacation and not worry about my medications. I can walk hand in hand with my hetero cisgendered husband. No one's gonna look twice. He does happen to be white, so many years ago, they would look twice and probably cause harm. The absurdity when we think about the progress that we can make in time. The other thing that you mentioned is, do we start over? Can I tell you how many times that conversation comes up in my circles? People are done. It's like, y'all are not getting it right. I'm gonna do it my way this time. If you don't want to play along, that's fine. But enough is enough, and enough is enough. The harm that is caused to Black bodies is exceptional. And I do see another hand. I see Martina. I'm just going to say one thing and I'll come to you. If you think about the telomeres at the end of our cells, tell you the life expectancy of an individual. The longer they are, the longer you live. There's a video called If These Cells Could Talk. I think it's on Vimeo, that describes how the telomeres of a 22-year-old Black male are the same length in American culture as a middle-aged white woman who has survived breast cancer. Your expectation of living, because being Black in white dominant spaces is already a health hazard. I can speak to that. I can give you personal testament, which is why I am no longer in Walnut schools. I am the picture of health. Able-bodied, 15 miles. I used to work out 8 hours a week. It was a picture of health. And they said, uh-oh, you're in trouble. It was supposed to be a small procedure and I was out of work for 2 months. And they said it was directly stress related. The backstory to that you can find on other resources, and I won't take your time to take that up, but it's a health hazard. The life expectancy of a perfectly healthy 22-year-old male, 22, compared to a 50-year-old woman who has survived breast cancer. That means there's a high probability she'll get it again and have to go through chemo, which is a death provoking experience in and of itself. And she has the same probability of survival as he does. And that's not accounting for violent death. That's normal, naturally aging out. I don't have any living grandparents. They all passed away at 75. All right, thank you. Was it Martina? Thank you.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you for all the inspiring things you have been saying. And it's kind of hard to ask a critical question now, but I have to ask it. I teach in a school in Germany with a lot of children from parents with left-wing political views and, you know, artists and things. So all of the children are, well, the young pupils that I teach, young adults, they are very political and have left-wing views. And I do notice that many of them are very aware, or if they become aware of the problems of, like, you know, how our capitalism destroys poor people's lives in India or Africa or other places, how the clothes we buy, they all, you know, they literally take the lives of people in poor countries. And we all kind of have to live with this shame or with this responsibility, like indirectly being responsible for that. And then the young people also, they live with, climate change and everything. So while I do see that all of what you're saying is important, and that it is important that everybody knows what we're doing, obviously, and that everybody knows that not everybody has the same access to everything, I wanted to ask you if you have any ideas of how to deal with, people who feel bad for having or for being better off,
History starts right now. If that question comes up often, like I said, the pain points are still pain. It's still painful. There's still shame and embarrassment, and thinking of all of the Black and brown children who had to live with that for hundreds of years. It doesn't make it okay now to say, okay, well, you get to suffer. I don't believe that that's the answer. I think if they want the narrative to change, they can change it right now. They can say, you were the one who made the difference. Help them be empowered, as opposed to feeling the shame and embarrassment. Say, no, it's in your hands. If you know you have the power to make a change, do it in the way that you feel is going to help course correct the legacy. There's nothing wrong with that. Say, okay, this happened. We learned from our mistakes. It's like the kintsugi process, where a vase cracks and you fill it in with gold, right? You shatter, let yourself be shattered. And when you come back together and you seal the cracks with gold or silver or platinum, you are more beautiful and more valuable than you were before you allowed that to happen. So it's okay when children are struggling with this idea of, whoa, did I do that? We can fix it. It's okay. We can all make mistakes. But now is your responsibility. If you're feeling it that hard, don't sit there and say, woe is me. Pick up the anvil and start making the change. Start making the difference that you wanted to see beforehand, right? Step in it. Get knee deep. My hope is that in considering the possibilities and being bold enough to ask the hard questions, extending your love and appreciation for the children who are coming before you, understanding that pulling back that veil a little bit, pulling off just a couple layers of those rainbow silk dyes, because the children can see straight through them. You must be authentic and genuine when you stand before them and tell them the truth about what they see unfolding in the world. Otherwise, they will consider you a fraud. There's nothing I want to see ever happen again as a graduating senior come back to us and tell them that we have misled them in their education. After granting so many beautiful gems, my daughter went through kindergarten through 8th grade, and she finally said, I don't want to do Waldorf anymore. I want to go to a normal high school. So she went from a class of 12 to a class of 1,000 in the public school in Los Angeles. So of course, in high school, as a mother, my heart is, panic stricken. And she said, I want hallways, I want other friends, I want a locker, I want a cafeteria, all of these things that are not typically available in Waldorf schools in Southern California. So she finally gets to, I grant her wish and allow her to go to a public school, and then the pandemic hit. So she spent her entire freshman year alone in her room. However, that freshman year, after going from a strict Waldorf independent school environment to a public school, out of 1,000 children, she was number 11. So there is beauty that I can attest to that lives there despite your identity.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. Sorry about that technological glitch. So very interesting conversation. I'm new to this forum. I was curious about it, but okay, it was worth it. Just some background. My name is Dion, if you pronounced it correctly. I ended up being involved in the Waldorf school in Windhoek, Namibia, in Southwest Africa. In full disclosure, I come from the other schooling system, the classical private school system, and I ended up becoming involved with the board and now with the curriculum development for the Waldorf school in Windhoek, in order to bring it in line with the country as it is right now. I found it interesting because you're talking about the same problems that we have but the other way around. We have a school that is majority Black with minority white students. And it's been a challenge to teach because the history that we are teaching right now is from the African perspective. Just another detail, in my previous career, I was 20 years an officer in an African army. So the history we teach is a history that comes from the liberation movement. And it's not entirely consistent with the African history that's taught in the rest of the world, be it from the African American perspective or be it from the European, Eurocentric perspective. In short, our history, basically, we do 2 months of 500 years of colonialism, and then we do 4 years of liberation. And a lot of identity politics and biases that come from the liberation movement itself are now the main ingredient of the historical narrative here in Namibia. So I just was curious as to your comment on that. Thank you very much. And sorry for the mic issue.
Oh, no problem. I think I'm hearing you say that the issues are reversed, where you are predominantly Black environment, where only a few students are white, and you are bringing the perspective with only 2 months of colonization and 4 more years of liberation. That is not the experience that we have here in the US, ever. Public school, private school, eons ago when I was in school. Since then, No Child Left Behind and Common Core that have come into place. It's not been the experience that we've had. To speak of the liberation of the rebellion, that is not a conversation that most Americans want to have. They do not want to speak of the rebellion. They don't want to tell you that the people have the power and the government must listen. It's actually the other way around here. I'm not sure if I'm answering a specific question with that regard, but I would love to see what you do, how you do it, and what you're using to do it, so that we can learn ways of integrating that. When I identify as a Black American woman of the African diaspora, it's because my family has been on this soil for 6 generations that I am aware of, and I am Black America. So I don't say African American because I believe that if I were to go to Africa, they would know right away, girl, you ain't from around here. Right? And it just diminishes my history on American soil. The transatlantic slave trade, the Emancipation Proclamation, the Jim Crow laws, Tulsa, Oklahoma, all of the bits and pieces that are very different from being an immigrant into the United States. I am the system. It is a walking miracle to see a Black person in America succeed, with all of the intentional efforts to equally erase us as they have the indigenous populations. To see someone of African descent in your presence is nothing short of a miracle, with every effort to eliminate the history and the people. So I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that feels. I'm a little bit jealous. I'm not gonna lie. Having those degrees of separation after 6 generations, not knowing where you're supposed to land. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, okay. Yes, it does. Okay.
Thank you. And I see commentary. Are we at time? Okay, are we good? We're okay?
5 to 7 more minutes.
Okay, I see commentary about land acknowledgements in the chat, and I just wanted to say that there is a conversation about that. I always want to acknowledge, at least I am aware of the fact that the land that I am occupying was taken through harmful measures, death, genocide, murder, rape, all of it. And to never overlook the fact that this is a true statement, at least here where I am, and to continue to uplift and acknowledge my awareness of how I came to be here, and whose land I'm actually occupying. I have a lesson with my middle schoolers in terms of whose land is it? and why. It's like, my grandparents owned this farm with acres and acres. And like, how'd your grandparents get that farm of acres and acres? How is it that this entire community, you can go into any state in the United States and find only a town with only white people in it? How did that happen? Where did all the people go? Right? So to have that question and to be here for 6 generations and not be allowed to do that, or to have documentation and laws saying the indigenous people have to go through a certain process to become citizens of their own land. The absurdity and the lack of conversation around that. So I do want to always acknowledge the land that I occupy, at least. An actual land acknowledgement should also come with some type of action, a donation, a tilling of the earth. Something has to follow it. But I do at least want to give it the honorable mention that it deserves. Working through Almo Partners, they will donate a certain portion of their proceeds when they do work with a school to Indigenous organizations. All right, was there anything else? I'm scanning, I'm scrolling. Am I missing anyone? Okay.
Okay. Any last words from your side? Oh no, there is Benedict coming in.
Thank you.
Yes, but it's going to be something very, very short. I just want to thank you for, it's hard for me to put it in words, but it's challenging and that's valuable. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you. I love it. I love this work. And I genuinely love Waldorf education and the potential that lives in it. I'm living for the day that we can really have the impact that we're intended to have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Kenya. That was really a moving talk, and it was wonderful to have it as a start for this sequence of lectures. It sets a mark, so to speak, and I'm questioning what to bring next week. So it will be me giving the talk next week about the topic of this sequence of lectures and chances and challenges of a global education. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you all again next week and all the other weeks as long as it's going here. And wish you a good day, a good evening, good night, wherever you are. All the best for you. And thank you so much, Kenya.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.